I knew after a term of doing it that it wasn't the job for me. We didn't want to invest heavily in it. If it wasn't for Google, I wouldn't have managed to create the business that we have today. Persistence was key. Just keep going and going.
This is the Education Business Podcast for all founders and business owners in the education sector. This podcast is for you if you have an education business or you're thinking about starting one. That could be tutoring, publishing, holiday clubs. It really doesn't matter. You're in business and you're also in education. But most of all, you're focused on improving outcomes for children in the way you know best, through your business. I'm Claire Riley, co-founder of educational resources website Classroom Secrets, and I'll be sharing how to make your education business bigger, better, and have more impact through my own experiences and also the conversations I have with other founders and business owners in education. The Education Business Podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets, helping you to support your children's learning. James, welcome to the Education Business Podcast. Now, I don't know a lot about your story. We've not had a conversation before, so I'm really excited to learn more about you and your journey. What I do know is that you are a head teacher and that you're also the founder of Number Stacks. So tell us a great story. Tell us the story of how you got into teaching, what it was that inspired you to become a head teacher, what then inspired you to create Number Stacks, and what did that journey look like for you? What were the challenges that other education entrepreneurs can learn from?
Hi, Claire. Thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. As an ex-teacher, I don't normally need an excuse to talk about things, but it's good to have one anyway. And I think, like any business owner, getting the opportunity to talk about their product and the history and the story behind it is always a great opportunity and one that you can't say no to. So where do we begin? Wow, what a question. I think for me, the journey spans from start of teaching to being a business owner. I think it was about 16 years in total. So I'll try and condense 16 years into a shorter time as possible. So hopefully don't bore you. I'll go back, way back actually, to the age of about 13. I used to be in the local cadet force. And I got the opportunity to train as a first aid instructor. Basically, it was a weekend course, and that meant that you could then instruct other cadets how to do basic first aid skills and things like that. So I took that, and this does have relevance. I promise you it will come up again later. And one of the things that really stuck with me, even to this day on that course, is we learnt a quote that was, what you hear, you forget, what you see, you remember, and what you do, you understand. And I know that's been used lots and pulled apart by some people, but for me, it still really rings true. It did at the time, and it does now. So anyway, I'll move away from that and go back to jump from 13 to the age of about 18. So I was just finishing university. I did randomly sports science and biological sciences at Essex University. And I think, like a lot of people, you come to the end of a degree like that, and it was, well, what do I do next? I'd love to sit here and say I've always wanted to be a teacher, but that wasn't the case. However, I remember at the careers fair that year, chatting to the people on the teacher training stand and thinking, do you know what? Going back again to those thoughts of when I was 13 and what I learned then, I thought I could probably do this. So I'll give it a go. So I applied, went for an interview, reeled out that quote that I just said, and somehow managed to bag myself a place on teacher training. So teacher training happened. It was a year for me because I'd already done a degree. Then got a job in a fantastic school, Friars Grove, local school to me. Happened to be actually the school that I went to as a pupil. So that was really weird. And got a job there and worked with some amazing people, people that I'm still friends with, and we still meet up, try and meet up termly or a couple of times a year, even now. And those people all went on to become sort of assistant heads, deputy heads, that sort of thing. And even once we'd moved off to different schools, we would still meet up. And one of the things we'd do or try to do every year is go to the Bet Show in London, which is, I'm sure you all know, the IT and education. So sort of an education show, education fair, where lots of companies and businesses would be there selling their wares. And we went because we wanted to try and find the latest things for our relative new schools. But the other reason we went is we would always talk on the train up there and at lunchtime and throughout the day. about business ideas. And we were determined, the three of us that went regularly, we were determined that, do you know what? We could do this. Yes, teaching's all right, but we're good enough between us to come up with an idea and run it as a business. But the biggest struggle was coming up with an idea. And we went on like this for several years, thinking, yeah, we could do it. Occasionally somebody came up with a half-baked idea, but it never really went through to anything. So back to the kind of education, new school teaching thing. I left Friarsgrove because I got a job as a deputy head at a lovely village primary school, Dedham Primary it was called. And I was deputy head there for, I think it must have been about 8 years. And everything was fine. It was great. I was a class teacher mostly. I got, I think it was half a day release time to do my deputy head stuff. The head was very experienced, so I learnt so much from her. And then the day came where she decided that enough was enough and it was time for her to retire. We'd always talked and laughed about headship, and my answer was always a very straight no, it's not for me. I like teaching. I like working with the children. I don't want to sit in an office all day. So I said no. Long story short, the governor's got to work on me. She got to work on me, like, subtly. And they ended up persuading me that maybe it was the right job for me. Maybe it was time to move on from teaching to more managerial role. One of the things that the chair of governors said to me was, imagine like when you're in a class, you have an impact on 30 children. But if you were the head, you would have an impact on 210 children. I thought, yeah. And the other thing he said was, we know you can do the job, but if you get somebody in that's maybe younger and less experienced than you, you'll hate it and you won't want to work for them and you'll disagree with the decisions and things like that. So I applied for it, I got it, and I knew after a term of doing it that it wasn't the job for me for all the reasons that I thought in the first place. So that was kind of a real crunch point, a real crossroads for me. So one term in, I decided I would give it a year before I made any decisions. And then at the end of that first year of headship, I spoke to the new chair of governors and I explained my situation. And I said, look, I'm going to give you another year. I've got a lot of loyalty to this school because I've been here for coming up 10 years now. And I don't want to leave you in the lurch. So I'll give you plenty of time to find a replacement. Obviously, that also gave me time to work out my next steps. I didn't want to do headship. I've done the deputy thing. I've been teaching for 16 years now. I thought it was time to just go for it, really. You hit those points in your life where everything's fallen into the right place or the wrong place at the right time. And you feel like you've got nothing to lose. So I thought, this is the time. So shall I go for one of the ideas that we've had and we've discussed before, or should I do something else? And the way number stacks came about, I might have mentioned it in my training video or something like that, but I've definitely told the story before, how the idea first came about where I was sitting with my younger, I've got two daughters. So my youngest daughter, who is now 10 and in year 6, when she was first born, I remember sitting up at about 2 o'clock in the morning, best thinking time, it turns out, and kind of having these seeds of an idea about number stacks and what to do. And it all came from when I was a year 2 teacher. We were using place value counters in the classroom. And I said to my teaching assistant at the time, I love these, but they're so messy. Wouldn't it be great if they did a stackable version somewhere? And I looked online and they didn't. And that was what came to me when I was trying to rock Holly to sleep in the early hours of the morning. And there that seed grew into a bigger idea. And ultimately became the business that I've got today. So, yeah, there you go. 16 years or so, probably more, squeezed into however long I've taken to bore you with that answer.
That's so interesting. You knew deep down it's not what you wanted to do. And even though you agreed with it, you still knew inside that it wasn't something that you wanted to embrace, especially for the long term. I've been in that situation on the other side of it. I've been an employer for 10 years or so now. And we've fallen into that trap before where we've thought, oh, this person would be great in this role and sort of pushed them to it. And now I really try and be careful of that and also make sure I'm building opportunities for them to try parts of it out, to see if it's for them, to see if they actually meet our expectations as well. So yeah, it's so interesting listening to that because I resonate with the chair of governors as well as you in that situation. So you had this idea, it's about 10 years ago. How did you take that idea and transform that concept into something that is now a physical product in classrooms? What were the steps that you took to get your business and your product from concept to an actual thing that schools could buy?
I think you're totally right. I think acting deputy and acting head are the way forwards, really, particularly for internal promotions in schools. And then people wouldn't have to experience the same thing that I did. So, yeah, perhaps that's an idea for anyone listening that's in those positions. Number stacks, going from an idea to a product. Wow. Quite a long journey, I would say. Started really, I think the first step was about financial security. So with a year to go, knowing that I was going to be effectively out of work, my first step was to make sure that we were financially secure. So moved a bit of money around, a little bit of remortgaging, that sort of thing, to make sure we had a pot of money, which meant if we earned, the worst happened and we earned nothing over the next 12 months, all the bills would still be covered. Alongside that, I started up a little tutoring business as well. I was lucky enough that Dedham Primary was in quite an affluent area, so there were a lot of parents that when they heard I was thinking about starting up tutoring, they would jump at the chance, and I got to run small groups. So bills were covered. That was the best thing, really, because it meant that we could then go at this idea with nothing to lose. And I think that was really important for us. And I say nothing to lose. That also was the case in terms of investing money into the business. We didn't want to invest heavily in it. I'm sure that's not necessarily the usual way people do things, but we wanted to make sure that if this thing flopped, we hadn't lost money and we could walk away saying, all we've lost is time, and time is the one thing that I did have plenty of, particularly compared to the hours I was putting in as a head teacher. So first thing we did was, I keep saying we because it's me and my wife, Kate, that run the business. And although I did a lot of the early day stuff, she's totally on board now, and we pretty much split things 50-50. But back in the day, she was the sounding board. She was the person that I used to run the ideas past. And yeah, she was very, very supportive of it all. So the first job was to put together what I call the physical resource kit. And the main part of this was the stackable place value counters. Google, I would say, was my best friend throughout this entire process. If it wasn't for a search engine such as that, other search engines are available, but Google is the go-to one. If it wasn't for Google, I wouldn't have managed to create the business that we have today. So lots and lots of searching. All of the components in the kit needed sourcing from somewhere. We were really fortunate that there was a great injection molding company within about a half an hour drive from where we are. So they were the ones that I ended up using to manufacture our counters for us. But it wasn't just the counters. It was everything from the zippy tough bags that the components go in. We had tens frames. We had packs of cards and number cards. And it was such a learning process to work out the cost of these things and how much it would all cost, because we hadn't set a price clearly for the resource kit. But one thing that I did want is that I wanted it to be affordable. I knew how tight schools' budgets were. So I really, really wanted to make this something that they would be able to afford and not have to sink hundreds of pounds into something that they wouldn't know if it worked or not. Google, lots of driving around. I remember driving around printing companies and showing them these little tens frames that we use with bar models on the back and saying, I need this made and I want it to be wipe clean. And they'd come back to me with quotes, or sometimes they'd just say no, but persistence was key, like not giving up and just keep going and going until you found what you wanted. And eventually it all kind of fell into place, and we ended up with this physical resource kit at a cost that I thought was manageable to schools. right at the beginning, we did kind of create more of a prototype. And if this was, a lot of the components there were made at home, printed. And a good old teacher's friend is always a laminator and a trimmer. And we did. I'd sit there and make number cards. I think it was, what do we have? 1 to 9 twice, that's 18, plus 4 zeros, that's 22, plus these little header cards that we have for each place value. So that's 28 cards. We would trim them, print them, trim them out, put them through the laminator, trim them again, all just to make one kit's worth of stuff. And we did a few of those, and it soon became unmanageable, or we realised it would be. So we had to go out to printers and try and find out the best way to create these things in a way that we could make it scalable. Another one I also remember was we have in our kits what I call a stack checker. It's a little cylinder with numbers up the side. And I went through many versions of that. I tried to make it out of wood. I tried to cut it out of plastic tubing that I sourced from somewhere, again, local to us. And there were lots of failed attempts, shall we say, and until I suddenly had a light bulb moment. And you go, hang on, why don't we just use the stackable counters that we've got in white and glue them together and put a wraparound sticker? So again, you have to find the stickers that are the right size, and I go on and on and on. But you get the gist. It was very much a long-term, how do we get this to work type situation. Eventually, we had the product, we had the kit, but what we didn't have was the means for teaching assistants and teachers and maybe parents at home to use this kit. It's no good if you don't know what you've got to do with it. I toyed with the idea of writing some sort of guide, but after thinking about one skill and trying to start writing instructions, it filled up pages. And I just thought, this isn't right. Somebody's going to have to read 3 sides of A4 to deliver maybe a 5 or 10 minute activity. And even then, we all know that written instructions can be interpreted in different ways. So abandoned that idea and set upon videos and thought, videos is the way forward. If I do the teaching in a video, then it can't be misinterpreted. Somebody can't deliver it not the way I intended. So yeah, videos. Turns out it takes quite a while to film a video. A typical section of a video is about 2 or 3 minutes long. But I sat there in this office that my in-laws kindly let me use for my tuition. So I'd tutor in the evening and I would do these videos in the mornings. And yeah, I would sit there and it might take 7, 8, 9, maybe more takes to do one little section of video. And it could be anything. Me stumbling on my words. I might have knocked a pile of counters over. There was a letterbox in the door. Sometimes the mailman would put something through the door mid-shot. And so it was like, oh, dearie me. And I think once even the fan, I had this little heating fan in the winter, and it would kick in halfway through the video. You think, right, stop, start again. And then, once you've got all these clips, they had to be edited together. And eventually, after 6 months, I think it was of filming, we had all the video. So that then needed to go onto somewhere that people could access it. We always wanted this to be pay to access, nothing expensive, but it needed to be a membership site. So again, not wanting to sink money, not wanting to pay someone to develop it for us, I looked up my best friend Google and set about learning how to use WordPress, how to make a website, how to get somebody to host the website, how to enter a membership-based plugin that would control and restrict what people could see. And then we had to set up payment processes, and we started off with PayPal and then tried to make sure you could do card payments and all those sorts of things. It just took a long time. There was a lot of failures. But eventually, again, I said persistence earlier, you had to persist and you couldn't give up. And problems were solved and things worked. And finally, we had this website that worked, that could take paid orders. Not that we'd had any yet, but I tested it out at 1p level. And we had everything there ready to go. And I think that was by around about May 2019. So getting on for the best part of a year from stopping being a head teacher, although there was a year's worth of looking and starting to source the physical components before that as well. So quite a long process to get there. And one thing I will say is I don't know for certain, but I would guess that many educational businesses are run by people that used to be teachers or used to work in a school environment. And people always say that, oh, as a teacher, you've got lots of transferable skills. Wow. It's not until you actually try something like this that you realize how many transferable skills that you do actually have. A lot of teachers I know feel trapped. Oh, I couldn't earn the money elsewhere, or there's nothing else I could really do. Honestly, believe in yourself, there is, because things that you can do, not everybody can do. And the beauty of being a primary school teacher is that your skills are spread over such a wide variety of subjects. And you'll find that you can put your skills to good use and produce something that people actually want to buy. So don't belittle your skills. Absolutely have confidence in what you can do. And you never know where it might take you. So yeah, there we are. We've got to the point where we've got a physical resource kit, we've got a website, and we're ready to launch.
Do you teach children as part of your business offering? Have you considered using resources from Classroom Secrets? At Classroom Secrets, we're always adding new resources for a range of subjects, and we're keen to hear your suggestions for resources too. We know that you didn't go into business to work more hours than you did in the classroom. You went into business to give you freedom. Let us help with that. Visit classroomsecrets.co.uk to sign up. I didn't realise that you had a WordPress site as well, but it is such a good platform for getting you started. We had a WordPress site as well, we don't anymore. But back then, we were quite limited actually on the membership plugins, whereas there's a lot more choice now. And back to your Google point, I often think, gosh, we are so lucky in this day and age that we have Google and we have the ability to get ourselves in front of so many people. Even the other day in the car, our kid said something, I can't remember what it was, but, oh, that'll take a long time. And me and Ed said, not now, not with the internet. Now it could happen really quickly if you work hard at it and you believe. I wanted to touch on persistence because you mentioned it twice. And, if anyone's not started a business, it's probably a key lesson. So let's just pull that out and leave it there. Persistence is key. You've got to keep going. You've got to keep adapting to find what it is that the market actually needs and wants to buy. How quickly did you find traction after that launch point? Had you been building an audience as you went along, or did you wait until that point? At what point did you feel like, oh gosh, this is actually becoming worthwhile now in terms of the money that's coming in?
I'm sure there's probably a guide or something to new businesses and starting a new business that says you need to make sure that you've got an audience and got a market there before you start. But we kind of did the complete opposite, really. I completed the product before we thought about generating an audience. And maybe that was a bit of naivety because I hadn't run a business before. But I just felt that the audience on the market would be there because I was the market. I was the person who was a teacher and who was a maths lead. And in my mind, it was all about creating something that would have been perfect for the needs that I wanted and that I knew would be the same and replicated in schools around the country. So the short answer to your question would be no. I didn't think or work on creating a market or an audience during the time I was creating the product. So after, I think it was about 6 months of work, we had our product, we had the website, and as I said before, everything was ready to launch. So we launched. And the launch essentially consisted of sharing details of it to our families and friends on Facebook. I had a limited Twitter, or X as it is now, profile, which was mainly of a personal nature because it was people that I'd followed through my work as a deputy head and then a head teacher and also an assessment lead and a maths lead. And I remember we started up a Facebook number stacks page and it grew to 100 followers. And we were like, wow, 100 followers. And then I had a Twitter page and I think I probably had about 50 followers at that point. And it was a case of, right, let's launch. So we put a post and I tagged a few key mathsy people in it who shared it for us on Twitter. And it was like, wow, so it's out there now. So what do we do next? Do we just sit and wait? But you can't just sit and wait. So our next step was to try and grow our profiles and grow our social media pages. And that's where my wife came in because I was very good at creating a product, but I was probably a bit reluctant to push it out there too much. I think it's a classic fear of failure. What if people don't like it? And she was more along the lines of, well, you've spent all the time creating this thing. We need to put it out there. And just if you get negative reactions, you've got to ignore them because you've got belief in this product and you think it's going to do well. So I'm sure there will be more positive reactions out there. So we found giveaways were a great thing to do. That's one of the first things we did on Twitter, and that encourages people to share because they had to retweet the post to enter. And I remember it blew up, and before you know it, the next to no followers had turned into kind of 2,000 followers, and that was really good. And we did the similar sort of thing on Facebook, and again, it sort of grew naturally through things like giveaways, and then COVID hit, which was an interesting one because that threw my safety net of my tutoring into real doubt. I did end up moving it onto online tuition, but I couldn't run the groups as I did before because I was very much, this has to be effective. It's not just about making money. And I had to reduce it to paired tuition. So that was a real dent to the finances. But luckily, we had enough of a following on Facebook that things were starting to grow and our post was starting to be seen by a wider audience. And that meant we sort of captured a different market of people. And one of those was the home ed market. I had a contact, it was a parent of someone who I tutored actually, who was a home edder. And she had put me in touch with somebody who ran a Facebook group. And they had, I think, about 6,000 likes or 6,000 followers to their membership group. And they offered discounts. And this was one of the only times we've ever offered a discount on our products. And I got in touch with this person and we said, yeah, we'll do a discounted bundle of a membership and a kit together to anyone that's a home educator. And they get in touch with you and you can give them this specific link that we'd created. And that went wild during lockdown. And although we couldn't get to the post office because everything was shut, the postal service was still working. So we would be going out with like 20, 25 parcels and touring the local post boxes and filling them up. And the post lady that used to come to our door, she'd take them for us sometimes. And she used to laugh and say, I want to stop you filling up all my post boxes. So lockdown actually ended up being a real positive thing for us. The other great thing that happened in lockdown was I did a lot of work with my daughters who were then very young. I think one was preschool and the older one was about year 2. And we filmed these little videos, which of them doing maths using the number stacks equipment. And my wife then uploaded one of these onto Facebook of my daughter doing fractions and explaining fractions using our counters. And this thing just went mad. And we used to think that if 500 to 1,000 people saw our post that we were doing well. And this thing just went into the hundreds of thousands. So I think there's quite a bit of luck involved, but it's self-made luck. And this video, we repost it occasionally. And I think now it's into the millions. And every time we post it, it's good because it generates discussion. And loads of people say, oh, isn't she great? Oh, this is really clear. Why didn't my teacher teach me like this? But what I've learned over time is that we do get the negative posts where people are saying, oh, well, they're not going to have counters down the shop, aren't they? Or why don't they just divide then multiply? And they just don't understand that what we're about is we're trying to get children to understand what's going on with the maths rather than just memorizing a formula. But we've learned over time to just ignore those comments. At one point, we used to try and reply to them and justify and explain. And now we just let it go. And we're the ones laughing because actually with videos that go that big, we monetize it or we do get paid very, very small amounts. But it's like an extra income source for us. So the more comments, the better, really. Summary really is that we grew and we grew as we went. We joined lots of groups. We would publicize where we can. Some groups said, oh, businesses can post on a Monday and not to go back to it again, but it's that persistence. It's just keep going and going and going and shameless marketing, really. The one thing we didn't do was email schools directly. And that was basically because I knew my office staff were great gatekeepers and they would just filter out all the junk because if they passed everything on to us, we would be bombarded. So I just thought, I don't think that's the right way for us to go. I'm sure it works for some businesses, but I didn't want us to go down that route. And it just ended up growing naturally from there.
Were you driven by this feeling that if I could only just help teachers or parents understand how this can transform maths for the children in their care, then it'd be a no-brainer? Is that what the drive was, to just really try and educate educators on how this could be really helpful for them?
I think the drive was twofold, really. Firstly, it was the needs of the children that came first and foremost into my mind when I was designing it. As a teacher, I'd seen so many children that struggled with maths. And it goes back to what I said earlier about when I applied for teaching. It was that quote of, what you hear, you forget; what you see, you remember; and what you do, you understand. And back several years ago, the use of manipulatives was very common in the early days in maths, so for the younger children. But the use of them throughout Key Stage 2, so in the older primary age groups, like 7 to 11-year-olds, it just wasn't there. It was only really used for children that were apparently struggling, in inverted commas. So I really wanted to encourage that. It's so much more commonplace now, and that's brilliant. But I wanted to make sure that children weren't just learning things for the sake of learning it. I wanted to build and develop that understanding of the concepts of maths. So I truly believe that if you know what's going on, then it's going to sit in your mind so much more easily, and you're going to be able to apply it to problems and questions much better than you were if somebody just taught you. So fractions of amounts, for example, if they just said, divide by the bottom and multiply by the top. You don't know what's going on there, and you're not going to remember that. You could easily mix it up. But with number stacks, we demonstrate, and visually and practically, they can divide numbers into piles of stacks, and then they can put 3 of those different piles together to go through the process of finding a fraction of an amount. And yeah, that was kind of the main driver. The other main driver, though, came from my position as a maths leader myself, as a teacher myself, and as a senior leader in schools myself. And that was to try and make something that was efficient and to improve workload. We hear lots about teachers and school staff being overworked, and every minute is precious. So what I didn't want to do is add more work on top of this. I wanted to actually take some of it away. And that was the reasons behind the website and the videos. So with Number Stacks, yes, we've got this physical kit, but it was about making sure that any adult, regardless of their maths teaching experiences, could use this kit to teach the children maths in the way that it was designed to be taught. I think I said before that I didn't want to use written instructions, so that's where the videos came in. And it was making sure that the teachers weren't spending 15 minutes of their time instructing somebody else what to do with a child that would also take 15 minutes, because it's just inefficient. So that was the second driver. It was all about workload and improving the situation for teachers, maths leads and senior leaders out there.
James, you have been so generous with your time. Thank you for everything that you've shared. I know that the listeners will really take some key things away. In your mind, what have we not talked about today that would be really useful for education business owners to know and think about?
Thank you for inviting me on. It's been a real pleasure to get the opportunity to talk, and it's always really nice to reflect. You don't get to do it that much, but the podcasts and things like this give you that chance to reflect and look back on your own story and what you've achieved in all those years. So yeah, thank you. To finish, I think the key things in my mind, some of what we've covered and some aren't, would be firstly, make sure there's a need. If you've got an idea for a product or something else, it really has to meet a need in schools, because budgets, as everybody knows, are slim to none. So unless what you're trying to create fulfills a need, then people aren't going to spend money on it. And it's as simple as that, really. And I know, like for you, Claire, Classroom Secrets really filled that need of helping teachers workload and having those instantly accessible resources that save them time. So that was really good. And if you're not a teacher, then get out there and speak to teachers. So that's one thing I'd recommend. The other thing would be pricing it right. make sure that it's affordable, because if it's a new product on the market, there's so much emphasis on research and evidence these days that people aren't as willing as they once were to take a punt on something new. So price it low, or even give things away for free, because the best marketing in the education sector, I think, is word of mouth. So if you can get into some schools work so much in partnerships these days that if you get somewhere and it's a success, they'll share it in their groups, who'll share it in other groups, and quite quickly it can snowball. And that's probably the best way to grow your business. And lastly, we've said it many times, but persevere, be persistent, don't give up at the first hurdle. And hopefully that's what make your business idea a success. So yeah, that's sort of it really. So once again, Claire, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So true, James, so true. And you've pulled out the key things that are very relevant for the education industry, but not necessarily in other industries. This is where it can be difficult to get advice from outside the industry. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, James, so much. Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Classroom Secrets. To find more resources to grow your business, visit classroomsecrets.co.uk.